The cold wind howled through the broken buildings of Outpost 9. It was a mining colony, long forgotten by the rich planets. Snow covered everything, and the air was so thin that most visitors didn't last a week, but one man lived there alone. His name was Callan, a retired human engineer, tired of war and lies. He chose this place for peace, for silence, but tonight, silence was broken. A soft knock came at his door, not loud, not rush, just 3 quiet taps. Callan froze, placing down his steaming cup of soup. No one knocked here. Not unless it was trouble. He moved to the door. Slowly, hand on the grip of his old plasma tool, he opened it carefully. There stood a woman, not human, not native. Her skin was soft purple, her eyes large and glowing faintly. She was shaking badly, her breath fogging in the air, in her arms. She held a little girl, no older than 4, wrapped in dirty cloth. The girl didn't cry, just looked up at Callan with wide, hollow eyes. The woman's voice cracked like dry leaves. "Just one night," she said. "Just feed her." She looked down, ashamed, then whispered, "You can have me. Just. Please, help her." Callan stared at her, then looked at the child. He saw how thin she was. Her cheeks sunken. The woman didn't look much better. Still, her hands clung protectively around the childlike armor. Callan stepped back. "Come." "Inside," he said, not unkindly. She blinked, confused, then followed him in. The door closed behind them with a hiss. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. The woman nearly collapsed, but Callan caught her. He helped her sit down and took the girl from her arms gently. The girl was light as air, barely moving. He wrapped her in a blanket and placed her near the heater. Then he poured the rest of his soup into 2 bowls and handed them over. The woman stared at it like it was treasure. She fed the girl first, spoon by spoon. Only after did she take a bite herself. Callan didn't speak, just watched. "I didn't expect kindness," she said finally. Her voice was stronger now, but still full of pain. Callan shrugged. "You came to me in need, not with a weapon." She lowered her head. "Most would have taken what I offered." "I'm not most," he replied. A long silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the heater and the sound of spoons scraping bowls. Then she spoke again. "My name is Sayla. That's your daughter?" Callan asked. She nodded. "Her name is Kira. Nice to meet you both." He said simply. Sayla looked up, eyes wet, but she gave a small smile. Kira fell asleep soon after, curled in the blanket, peaceful for the first time. Callan brought an extra bedroll and placed it near the fire. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "But you don't owe me anything." He interrupted. "I didn't help you to get something back." Sayla didn't speak. For a long time, she lay beside her daughter, watching the fire flicker. Callan sat at his small table, quietly working on a broken drone part, but his mind wasn't on his hands. He kept glancing at the 2 figures on the floor. Why had she come here? Why was she running? This planet was barely on any star maps. How had she even found his shelter? As the night deepened, the wind outside picked up. The old metal walls creaked, but inside, it was warm. Safe, for now. Callan finally stood, checking the door lock again, just in case. He stared out the small window. Eyes narrowing, he thought he saw something. Far off, a shadow moving against the snow. But when he looked again, it was gone. Probably nothing. He told himself. Still, he kept his plasma tool closed that night. Sayla didn't sleep easily. She twitched in her bedroll, sometimes mumbling in a strange tongue. Callan didn't understand the words, but the fear in her voice was clear. She was running from something, or someone, and now, by letting her in, so was he. He sighed, staring at the fire. Maybe he should have said no. Maybe he should have stayed alone. But then he looked at Kira, her small face resting against her mother's arm. Finally fed, finally warm. And Callan knew. Some choices don't need reasons. He had made his, and it had just begun. The morning came slow. With a gray light creeping through the small window, snow was still falling outside. Gentle but steady, Callan stretched his sore back and walked quietly across the cold floor. He glanced at the two figures near the heat, still asleep. Still breathing, Selah had her arm wrapped around the little girl. Her face calm for once. For a moment, Callan just watched. It felt strange, like he wasn't alone anymore. He started a small fire and heated some dried root broth. The smell filled the shelter with warmth. Soon, Kira woke first, rubbing her eyes and looking around when she saw Callan. She didn't speak, just blinked at him curiously. He smiled and handed her a warm mug. She took it, quietly sipping, then Selah stirred, her eyes flashing open with fear until she saw her daughter safe and Callan by the stove. You didn't send us away," she whispered. "I said you could stay the night," Callan said. "But I didn't say you had to leave at sunrise." Selah slowly sat up, wrapping her arms around Kira. She seemed surprised, like no one had ever offered her a second morning before. "Why are you being kind to us?" she asked, voice trembling. Callan poured a mug for her too. "Because I can be." They sat in silence again, only the fire crackling, but Callan had questions. He looked at Selah closely, now really looked. There were faint marks on her wrists, small burns and lines, old injuries that told a quiet story. Callan pointed gently. "They hurt you." Selah pulled her sleeves down, but nodded. "Slavers," she said, voice hollow. "Not just once. Not just one kind." Kira looked up at her mother, sensing the pain. Callan didn't ask, more he could see it in her eyes. But one thing still didn't make sense. "You said you were running from them," he said. "But how did you get all the way out here? This place isn't on most maps." Selah looked down, fingers trembling around the mug. "We took a smuggler ship. I paid with what I had left." Her voice cracked again. "We jumped from port to port, hiding. Then the ship dropped. U.S. near the mountains. We walked for 3 days. 3 days in this cold, with no real food, no shelter, and a child." Callan shook his head in disbelief. "You're lucky you found my signal beacon." Selah blinked. "I didn't." Callan frowned. "Then, how did you find me?" Selah looked at Kira, then back at him. She said to go this way. Kira gave a small smile, her big eyes glowing just a little in the light. Callan felt a chill, not of fear, but something deeper. There was something odd about the girl. She was too quiet, too calm for a child who had suffered, and last night, her skin had glowed faintly in the dark. He hadn't imagined it that evening, as the wind picked up again. Callan went outside to check the solar panels as he cleared the snow. He paused. There were tracks. Fresh ones, not made by him, not by Selah or the girl. Clawed feet, small but deep, leading from the ridge down to the shelter, and then vanishing. He returned inside and locked the door tighter. He didn't tell Selah about the tracks, not yet. She already had enough fear in her eyes. Instead, he set up a motion sensor near the entrance, just in case. Better to be safe than sorry. Later that night, while the girl slept and Selah lay on her bedroll, half awake, Callan stayed at his workbench, pretending to fix an old circuit, but he was watching. Kira began to murmur in her sleep, speaking softly in a language Callan didn't recognize. Her fingers moved in strange patterns in the air, like drawing invisible lines. Then a soft light pulsed from her chest and faded. Callan's eyes widened. He didn't know much about alien powers, but he knew when something wasn't natural. Selah suddenly opened her eyes and saw Callan staring. "She doesn't mean harm," she said quickly, sitting up. "She's just different." Callan nodded slowly. "What is she?" Selah hugged her daughter close. "Not what they say she is. "That's not an answer," Callan replied gently. Sayla's voice dropped low. She was born from pain, but also from something else. Callan waited, but she didn't say more. Only this: many would kill her for what flows in her veins. Callan leaned back, trying to process it all. He wasn't just sheltering a mother and daughter, he was sheltering something the galaxy feared. And yet, when he looked at Kira's peaceful face, he didn't feel fear. He felt something else. A strange kind of responsibility. Like maybe, just maybe, they were meant to find each other. Snow kept falling, covering the frozen land in a white, endless blanket. It was quiet. Too quiet. Callan had lived on this cold planet for almost 4 years, and he trusted his instincts. Something was wrong. He stood outside his shelter, squinting. Into the wind, a gust of snow blew across the hill, but the tracks were still there. Not animal, not human, for toes. Long claw marks deep into the snow. Whoever or whatever had been here wasn't wearing boots. The prints came from the ridge above and stopped near his generator unit. Then, nothing, no exit path, no sign of turning away. It was like the creature had vanished. Or flown. Callan's jaw tightened. Someone had found them, and they hadn't come in peace. He returned to the shelter and locked the door behind him. Sayla looked up from where she was brushing Kira's hair. Callan forced a calm voice. "You see or hear anything last night?" She shook her head. "No? Why?" Callan shrugged. "Just checking the perimeter. Nothing important." But she didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. She was always alert, always watching for danger. She knew tow trouble was getting closer. That night, Callan moved his old sensor drones into position. They were outdated, leftovers from his military days, but they still worked. He placed one near the ridge, another by the power unit, and one under the snow near the back wall, if something came again. This time, he'd know. Inside, Kira sat by the fire, her small hands holding an old music box Callan had found in storage. She hummed softly along with the tune, even though she had never heard it before. Callan watched her carefully. Something about the girl was not normal, too calm, too aware. She didn't act like a child raised in pain. She acted like she had seen more than most adults ever would. Later, while Sayla cleaned the dishes with melted snow, Callan took a quiet moment with her. "Who's after you?" he asked, his voice low. Sayla looked at him, her face tense. "People who believe in bloodlines," she answered. "What does that mean?" Sayla hesitated, then said, "Kira's father wasn't from my world. He was something else." Something. Old, some say. Forgotten. Callan raised an eyebrow. Was he dangerous? Sayla didn't answer directly. "He was powerful," she said, "but not cruel." Still, they feared him, and now they fear her, Callan guessed. Sayla nodded. "They think she will awaken something." Something that should stay asleep. Callan leaned back in his chair, trying to wrap his mind around what that meant. "She's just a little girl," he muttered. "To you," Sayla said, "but to them, she's a spark in dry grass." That night, Callan didn't sleep. He sat near the control panel, eyes scanning the old screen connected to the motion sensors. Hours passed. The snowstorm grew worse. Then at 3:14 local time, the sensor near the ridge lit up red. Movement. He grabbed his plasma tool and went to the window. Careful not to make noise. Far off, he saw just a shape, standing still on the ridge. Not moving, just watching. Even from this distance, Callan could feel it was looking straight at him. Then, slowly, it vanished behind the rocks. He didn't tell Sayla. Not yet, but the next day, he reinforced the doors, charged the old turret system above the shelter, and reprogrammed the drone to follow heat signatures. Kira noticed. "Are we in danger?" she asked softly. Callan gave her a soft smile. "Not while I'm here." Kira nodded and returned to playing with her music box. but even she seemed quieter, like she knew something big was coming. Sayla stood beside him later, her arms crossed. They found us, didn't they? Callan didn't lie. Yes, he said. But they haven't come in yet. Yet, she whispered. Like a curse, Callan looked at her. If you tell me the truth, I can help. Sayla looked down at the floor for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She's more than a child, Callan. She's part of something ancient. Her father wasn't just powerful. He was part of the rune. Callan blinked. The rune? That's a myth. Some old alien god story. Sayla met his eyes. He wasn't a story. A deep chill crept into Callan's spine. He looked over at Kira, now sleeping peacefully under blankets. If what Sayla said was true, then the people chasing them weren't just slavers. They were believers, maybe cults, maybe governments. And if they knew Kira was here, this shelter would become a battlefield. He stood up and walked to the control panel. He began typing in old override codes from his soldier days, preparing shields, checking supplies, scanning for more movement. He didn't know exactly what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. He would not let them take that little girl not without a fight. The snowstorm died by morning, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. Callan stood at the window, staring out at the ridge where the shadow had appeared. It was gone now, but the feeling stayed like something was watching. Waiting, he checked the sensors again, but everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then a knock came. But not soft like Sayla's knock that first night. This one was heavy, confident. 3 sharp hits, like steel against steel. Callan's hand went straight to his plasma tool. He looked at Sayla, who had frozen in place, eyes wide with panic. Kira clutched her mother's leg, sensing something was wrong. Stay inside, Callan whispered, moving to the door. He pressed a button, unlocking only. The top viewport outside stood a tall figure wrapped in a long cloak, snow clinging to the fabric. The hood was down, revealing pale gray skin and sharp yellow eyes. A Zaleria species known for tracking, hunting, and never leaving a job unfinished. The alien smiled coldly. Human, he said smoothly. I'm looking for something that doesn't belong to you. Callan didn't blink. This isn't a shop. Move on. The Zelari tilted his head. She has something that belongs to my client. I don't care, Callan said flatly. She's not leaving with you. The Zelari smile didn't change. He reached into his cloak and held up a pouch filled with glowing chips. Enough to buy your shelter twice over, he said. I'm only interested in the girl. Callan narrowed his eyes. She's not for sale. The Zelari smile faded, replaced by something colder. Then I'll return tonight and I won't knock, he said. He turned and walked into the snow, disappearing like a ghost. Callan shut the viewport and bolted the door, hard. Sayla rushed forward, her voice shaking. That was him. His name is Varric. He tracked us across 3 systems. Bounty hunter. Callan asked. Worse? She whispered. He's a collector. He doesn't stop until he gets what he wants. And what he wants is Kira, Callan said. His jaw tight. Sayla nodded. He doesn't care about money or mercy. Callan moved quickly, activating the defense turret on the roof. He opened crates of old supplies, metal parts, tripwire, EMP mines he swore he'd never use again. But this wasn't just survival anymore. This was protection. He placed charges near the perimeter, rewired the drone for full auto response, and checked the heater unit, making sure it wouldn't explode if shot inside. Sayla helped Kira pack a small bag just in case they had to run. But Callan knew running wouldn't be enough. Not this time. Not from someone like Varric. By sunset, the shelter had been turned into a fortress. Not perfect, but it would hold. Callan sat at the table, cleaning his plasma tool. Eyes on the door, Sayla sat across from him. Quiet, watching his hands. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Callan didn't look up, "Because if I turn away now, I'll never forgive myself." Sayla looked at her daughter, who had fallen asleep beside the fire. "She's not just a child," she said again. "She's connected to something bigger." Callan finally looked up. "Then I'll fight something bigger." His voice was calm, but his eyes were storming. "You've already lost too much." He added, "Let's not lose her too." The night came fast, and with it, death. The sensors lit up red, one by one, first near the ridge. Then the back slope. 3 figures moved in the snow, fast and silent. Not just Variki brought back up. Mercenaries in black armor, cloaked in energy fields. Callan flipped the switch, his traps armed instantly. The shelter's exterior lit in red pulses. Boom, an explosion rocked the side. One of the mercs stepped on the mine near the left pipe. The second drone fired a shock dart into another, dropping him in the snow. But Variki was already at the door, moving like a shadow. He cut the lock with a plasma blade and kicked it in. Callan stood ready, firing one blast that hit the wall. Varric rolled aside, too fast. He returned fire, grazing Callan's shoulder. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and Kira screamed. Sayla rushed to shield her, pulling her behind the heater. Callan dove behind the workbench, ducking another shot. But then Vorik stood in the center of the shelter, weapon aimed at Kira. Callan raised his tool, blood dripping down his arm. "Back away," he growled. Vorik smiled again. "I told you," he said. "I always come back." But before he could fire, Kira stepped forward, glowing blue. She raised her hands, eyes full of light. A force pulsed from her chest, like a wave of energy. The lights flickered, the walls shook, and Varric screamed, thrown back into the steel frame. He collapsed, twitching. His weapon shattered beside him. Silence returned, heavy and thick. Kira fell to her knees, breathing hard, the glow fading. Callan rushed to her, catching her before she hit the floor. Sayla was already beside them, tears in her eyes. She protected herself. Sayla whispered, "She's waking up." Callan looked at the unconscious body of Vorik, then at the little girl in his arms. "She's not just a key," he muttered. "She's a storm." Smoke curled through the shelter. Sparks flickered from broken panels, and the air stung with the smell of burnt metal. Callan's shoulder throbbed, warm blood soaking through his sleeve. But he didn't care. He knelt beside Kira, who had fainted. In his arms, her skin still faintly glowing. Sayla pressed her hand to the child's forehead, tears slipping down her cheeks. "She used too much," she whispered. "She's too young for this." Callan looked around, his mind racing. Varric's body twitched near the wall, still alive, but stunned. The second mercenary was gone, dragged away by the storm, or dead in the snow. Only one had made it inside. And Kira had stopped him, but at what cost? Callan picked up the girl gently and placed her on the cot. He turned to Sayla, his voice low but steady. "Watch her. I'll handle the rest." Sayla grabbed his wrist. "You're wounded," Callan gave a dry smile. "I've bled for worse. This time, it's worth it." He grabbed a roll of bandage and wrapped his shoulder tight. Then he checked the turret controls aflame. Wires burned. The drone was still running, but its ammo was low. He had one EMP charge left, one emergency lockdown trigger, and a gut full of anger, enough to start a war if needed. The wind howled outside again, louder this time. Through the crack in the door, Callan saw movement. More figures, 3, at least, dark shapes climbing the ridge. Reinforcements. He muttered. Sayla looked up sharply. How did they send more so fast? Callan's face hardened. They didn't. These aren't hired guns anymore. This is something else. He was right. The figures outside wore long robes, not armor. They held staffs that glowed at the tips and moved slowly, too slowly for. Soldier Sayla's face went pale. The Seekers, she breathed. They follow the bloodlines. They don't speak. They judge. Callan didn't wait. He grabbed the EMP and planted it near the entrance, setting the trigger to manual. Then he reinforced the heater's core and rerouted energy from the backup batteries. This shelter was his home. Now it would become his battlefield. Sayla took Kira's hand and whispered in her ear. The girl stirred, her eyes flickering open for just a second, then closed again. Callan watched them from across the room. The two of them didn't belong in this cruel galaxy. But maybe, just maybe, he could carve out a place where they'd be safe. A heavy knock came slow, ritual-like. Callan stepped forward, pressing the COM switch near the door. "What do you want?" he demanded. No voice answered, only silence. Then a voice came, not spoken, but in his head. "Give us the child, and we will spare your life." Callan grit his teeth. "You'll have to kill me first." The voice returned, calm and cold. "We will." They tried to enter without sound, but Callan had set traps for silence too. The first Seeker triggered the motion wire, and a wave of fire burst across the threshold. He fell back, robe scorched. The second moved faster, too fast, and leaped over the flames. Callan met him with a metal pipe, slamming it across his head. The Seeker didn't bleed. Instead, his skin cracked like stone, breaking into shards. "What the hell are they made of?" Callan muttered. The Seeker grabbed his arm and flung him across the room. Callan hit the wall hard, pain exploding through his side, but he still had the EMP trigger in hand. He waited until the third Seeker entered, then pressed the button. A pulse of blue light exploded in the shelter, shorting everything light's weapons. Even the Seeker's glowing staffs. The creatures froze, twitching. Confused by the surge, Callan didn't waste the moment. He tackled one, grabbed a fallen blade, and drove it through the Seeker's neck. It collapsed in a heap of cracked stone. The others backed away, now unsure. They weren't used to resistance, not from humans. Callan stood, blood on his face. Breathing heavy, "I said, she's not yours," he growled. "You don't touch her." Then, behind him, a new light formed, soft and blue, like the sky on a world that had never known war. Kira stood up slowly, her eyes glowing brighter than ever before. She walked past Callan, barefoot, steady. The Seekers turned to her, and for the first time, Nate. Not in worship, but in recognition, like she was something older than their fear. Kira spoke, not with her voice, but with her presence, and the Seekers fled. The shelter grew quiet again. Only the wind remained outside. Callan turned to Kira, who looked up at him with tired eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Barely, I remember now." Sayla rushed to her and hugged her tight. Callan sat down slowly, his body aching. The fight was over. For now, but deep inside, he knew this girl wasn't just someone to protect. She was someone the galaxy might follow, or fear, and he had chosen the right side. Asterisk, the snow stopped falling by morning. The sky was clear, cold, and silent. Inside the battered shelter, Callan sat beside the heater, his shirt stained with dried blood. The pain in his ribs was sharp, but he didn't care. Across the room, Sayla held Kira, rocking her gently, whispering soft words in a language Callan couldn't understand. The girl was awake now, but quiet. Her glow had faded. But something deeper remained in her eyes, something ancient and aware. The Seekers had not returned. Their message was clear. They had seen enough. For now, they would leave the girl alone. But Callan knew, peace like that never lasted forever. Still, the war was over for today, and that meant it was time to rebuild. Callan stood slowly. Every muscle aching, he looked around at the shelter. Walls cracked, doors burned. Wires hanging like vines from the ceiling. It was a mess, but it was still standing like him. He began repairing it piece by piece. He fixed the heating core first, then sealed the outer door. Sayla tried to help, but she was exhausted, so he told her to rest. "You've run long enough," he said softly. "Let me carry it for a while." That night, he cooked the last of his supplies. A stew of root, dried fish, and spices from a tin can nearly 10 years old. It wasn't much, but it was warm. He served 3 bowls, placing one beside each of them. They ate in silence, and for the first time, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like family. Kira giggled once when Callan accidentally dropped his spoon. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, a light, sweet sound that felt like spring cutting through a long, frozen winter. He smiled at her. "You're trouble, aren't you?" he said. She nodded with a grin, and Sayla smiled too, for a moment. They weren't a fugitive, a guardian, and a hunted child. They were just 3 souls under one roof, sharing warmth. Later, while Kira slept curled in blankets, Callan and Sayla sat near the fire. She looked at him with soft eyes, tired but no longer hollow. "You should have turned us away," she said. "I thought about it." Callan replied honestly, "But then I saw her face. That changed everything." Sayla looked down at her hands. People only saw the danger in her, never the hope. Then they were blind. Callan said. He took a deep breath. "You don't have to run anymore. But what if they come back?" She asked, "What if others find us?" Callan leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "Then we deal with them," he said, "together." Those words stayed in Sayla's mind the whole night. Together. No one had said that to her in years. Every step of her journey had been alone until now. In the days that followed, they turned survival into living. Callan rigged new defenses, but left room for flowers to grow. Sayla helped clean the wreckage, sewing blankets from scrap cloth. Kira painted strange symbols on the walls, glowing ones that hummed softly when the wind blew. Callan didn't know what they meant, but somehow they made the shelter feel alive. Kira began calling him something new, Papa, the first time she said it. Callan dropped the mug he was holding. Sayla laughed quietly while he tried to pretend it didn't shake him, but it did. He had lost his own family long ago, he thought. Those parts of his heart were buried, but this girl, with all her secrets and power, had opened them again. One morning, Callan stood outside. Watching the sunrise break over the snowy hills, Sayla joined him. Wrapping a worn blanket around her shoulders, she stood close, but not too close. There was still pain between them, but less now, much less. "This place," she said. "It feels like home." Callan nodded slowly. "I think it is." She looked up at him, her eyes warm. "You didn't just save us," she said. "You changed us." He looked down at her, then toward the shelter, where Kira's laughter echoed through the open door. "Funny," he whispered. "I thought I was saving you, but really, you saved me too." And for the first time in a long time, Callan smiled, not out of habit, because he meant it. Weeks passed since the attack. Snow still blanketed the world outside. But inside the shelter, warmth had returned. Callan had repaired the roof, fixed the sensors, and even built a second room using scrap from the fallen drone ship. It wasn't pretty, but it was strong. And more than that, it felt real. It felt like home. Kira's powers hadn't flared again since that night, but she had changed. She moved with quiet confidence now, as if something inside her had settled. She helped Callan with tools, followed Sayla during morning chores, and painted new glowing lines on the walls each day. The symbols shifted when no one was looking, like they were alive. Callan didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He had accepted long ago that Kira was more than a little girl. She was something the galaxy didn't understand, but he did. One morning, while collecting melted snow in metal pots, Callan heard the warning ping from his long-range scanner. A ship, big, slow, and not hiding its signal. Sayla stepped out of the shelter as the wind picked up. "You feel it too?" she said. Callan nodded. "They're coming." The ship landed 2 hills away, quiet as a falling feather. Not military, not mercenary, painted silver with green stripes, Galactic Council markings. Callan's jaw tightened. He had sent a message weeks ago after the attack. A message not asking for help, but warning them to stay away. But someone had come anyway. 3 figures stepped out of the ship, unarmed, robes flowing. Not seekers, this time council diplomats. Sayla kept Kira close, her hand never leaving. Her shoulder, Callan stood between them and the envoys. His plasma tool strapped to his hip. The lead envoy spoke calmly. "We received your broadcast. The footage, the data, the light." Callan didn't answer. The envoy continued. "We did not come to take the girl?" Callan narrowed his eyes. "Then why are you here?" The envoy looked at Kira, then at Sayla. "To witness," he said, "to record the truth." The other 2 envoys held out strange devices, scanning Kira from a distance. She didn't flinch, didn't hide. She stood behind Callan with her hands around his coat. The lead envoy lowered his gaze respectfully. "She is not a weapon," he said. "She is a possibility." Callan crossed his arms. "And what will your council do with that possibility?" The envoy replied, "Nothing. She is no longer hunted. Her power is awakening across the stars. Others like her may follow. We are watching now, not chasing." Then he handed Callan a small disc, proof of her identity. "Citizenship rights." "A name?" Callan blinked. "What name?" The envoy smiled faintly. "She chose one while you were inside." "Kira of Hearthstone." Sayla's eyes shimmered. "Hearthstone." Callan looked down at Kira, who was smiling wide. "That's our home," she whispered. The envoys left as quietly as they arrived. Their ship vanished into the pale sky, leaving only silence behind. But everything had changed. Kira was no longer a target. She was recognized, protected, free. That night, the stars above the shelter glowed brighter than usual. Callan sat beside the fire, sharpening tools, while Sayla prepared tea. Kira danced barefoot near the glowing wall symbols, her laughter echoing like music for the first time. There was no fear in any of them, only peace. Callan looked over at Sayla, who caught his gaze and smiled. He reached for a small pouch near the table, pulled out a simple ring he had built from melted wire and scrap crystal. He stood slowly and walked over to her. She blinked, surprised. "Sayla," he said quietly, "I never expected family again. But somehow, you and Kira found me before. I knew I was lost. If this place is home, then you are the reason. Will you stay not just in the shelter, but in my life?" Sayla looked at him with soft eyes, then at Kira, who nodded excitedly. She whispered, "Yes," and took the ring in her trembling hand that night. They didn't just survive, they celebrated. Not with music or crowds or grand speeches, but with warm fire, held hands, and a promise whispered into the stars. Callan had once come to this frozen world to be alone. Now he had a daughter, a partner, and something even rarer. Hope. And Kira, born of pain and mystery, now slept in peace. Her past couldn't be erased, but her future was hers to shape. A future built not on power or fear, but on the kindness of a man who simply opened his door and chose love over silence.